move in and out. You can go around. It's spatial. Sadly, I think this is recording in mono. I've been trying to get that changed.
Okay. Are we literally recording
Audacity only records in mono.
Is this a new board?
This is a new board, yes.
I know you've been talking about that.
I do have a...
These are new microphones, or some of them are new?
Yeah, some of them are new. I have a full Behringer with, I think, one extra input and like effects, but the problem is I got a second hand for like $200.
Is the G silent?
Behringer.
I mean,
I'm a
noob here. I've always heard.
But you are an English major in comparison to this guy.
That's true.
You would know a pronunciation.
You're not a noob. You worked in AV. AV is the same as I just work in A. Even though you focus primarily on V, I also work in A.
I try to get rid of the A as much as possible. I don't like the A part as much.
Yeah.
Pass that on.
Well, that's kind of required though for what you do.
Well, yes, I do have to do the A.
Yeah.
But
much to your chagrin.
Thank you, Josh.
There's a lot of jokes here, but anyway, hey, we got Chandler Ryd on the podcast. He's a cool dude. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Chandler Ryd.
You've been excited to come on the show, I hear. You've been looking forward to it.
Well, see, I have, as you guys know, the messenger chat that's called Chandler Reacts to Monomaniacs.
Yes, it's true.
It's true.
But it's very exclusive in the fact that it's just us three, and it's also very sparing.
Yeah,
and its reactions.
So I guess
it's only the extreme reactions.
I guess we can litigate Terrence Malick right now, live on air.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Who we were talking to Nick Rowan, and he was talking, some guff on Terrence Malick. Now I've only seen A Hidden Life, and I did speak disparagingly about A Hidden Life,
which I don't think is fair. I think it's a great movie. We have a poster of it in our living room. That's how much we love it.
Okay.
So we watch it about once a year.
All right. A Hidden Life?
Yeah.
So you've only watched it 2 years?
No, it came out.
It came out like 2 years ago.
No, it didn't.
Yeah.
No, it didn't. It was,
I saw it in Washington,
Are you thinking of The Secret Life of Walter Mitty?
No, I don't think it was 2 years ago. I think it was...
3 years ago?
I don't know. We've seen it at least... I know we've seen it at least 3 times.
Okay. All right, that averages out.
Yeah.
That averages out. You see it 1.25 times a year.
Sure. So each year you watch A Hidden Life, and you also watch A Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
Yeah, that's probably about it.
Okay, yeah.
And then
there's a lot of lives being watched.
And then about every 3 months we watch Paddington. So
okay,
both of them.
Oh,
I got to get on this Paddington thing because I've heard it's amazing.
Everybody's loving it.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
The second one's better, but start with the first.
Wow.
The first has...
It's like Godfather.
the first has a scene in the middle that always makes me cry.
Yeah.
And the second one has a scene at the end that always makes me cry.
I think the last time I cried in a film was when I was in like a sophomore in high school, and I cried in Les Mis. So it's been a long time since a movie has tugged my heartstrings like that.
And you travel a lot, so you should know this as well. But on flights, right, you're more likely to cry. Just in general, just due to pressure, is what I've heard. Right, it's like something to do with your ducts.
Don't think I've ever cried on a plane.
Really?
No.
So like the only time I've ever
cried on a plane, but for unrelated reasons.
Not for movie reasons.
Yeah.
Let's just say that the person next to me was very mean. From what I understand, it's much more common, and the only time I've cried during a movie as I was watching it was when I watched Coco on a plane.
Okay.
Pixar's Coco on a plane. And like it's like all these like themes about like family and togetherness and all that stuff.
You could have just watched Fast and the Furious and the same thing.
I know. Exactly. Yeah, and it would have been a lot more fun too. Usually those don't hit with me at all, but for some reason I was weeping on the plane for Coco.
When I'm on a plane, I often intentionally watch movies that I would never watch anywhere else.
That's exactly how I feel about it.
Which is usually whatever the latest Marvel movie is.
Yeah.
And I come in with low expectations because I'm on a plane.
Yeah.
And then I usually enjoy it.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And usually if I watch one of those movies like when I'm at home or something like that, I don't like it as much. So now I've just decided.
You watch like a movie that it's either a comedy or an action film. Something that has low stakes, is enjoyable.
Best plane movie experience. I've had a few great movie plane experiences, but one of them was flying to Paris.
Nice.
I watched Mission Impossible Fallout, in which Tom Cruise drives around Paris on a motorcycle and does this elaborate heist. It was a great time because then I could go and see and be like, look, Laura, it's the Arc de Triomphe. This is where Tom Cruise rode around in a circle.
The most historical thing that ever happened
at the Arc de Triomphe
in this region.
Right. Forget Napoleon Bonaparte. Tom Cruise was here. Another famous short guy.
There you go. I was trying to find the short angle. I'm glad you found it.
Yeah.
No, I got to tell my flight story. It's insane. I've never experienced anything like this. I was on a plane, on a flight to LA, and a woman in front of me was watching the first Rush Hour film. Okay. And she watched the movie in the most psychotic way I've ever seen somebody watch a film, which was she would watch 10 minutes of it. Her significant other would distract her. She would talk to her significant other for 30 seconds to a minute, no longer than that. And then she would go back a full 5 to 10 minutes so that she didn't miss anything. And she watched Rush Hour for the entire 4.5-hour flight.
Wow.
And landed as we were landing, she was finishing it up.
I'm sure by the end of it she could do Chris Tucker's, Michael Jackson impression.
Just the entire time. Yeah. So she would watch. I kept looking up I've seen this part of the movie before, just over and over and over again. I don't know what was going through her head on that.
Well, I think I know exactly what was going through her head, and that's what was going through the head of a girl who was in front of me when I was on a flight. She at the time was, I think, probably 5 years old, but she watched the Paw Patrol movie 5 times. Flight to Nashville, Tennessee. She watched it 5 times. So pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I
guess yes, you're
Must
right.
be a short movie. I mean,
well, I mean,
it's like
hour 20.
Hour 20.
Yeah, hour 20, right?
There you go.
It's feature length. It's feature length. Really good seller for that.
The feature length.
But back to Terrence Malick. I feel like we're distracting on this. We're distracting a little bit. Actually, my favorite thing to do on planes is watch somebody watch a sex scene because they get really uncomfortable.
Yes, it's true.
So you look over their shoulder, they're like,
yeah. Let me tell you, watching Ripley's The Duel on a plane, that's tough. Yeah. That's tough because I'm behind you and I'm also watching The Duel. You may not have any idea that other people are watching you watch The Duel, but The Duel isn't a movie you should be watching on a plane. Uncensored that film on a plane. So
yes. Most films now. That's weird, isn't it?
That is weird. Yeah.
I the last time I saw a movie that was censored on a plane was when I watched Nice Guys with Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
And they not only censored the nudity in the film, but they censored they made it for TV.
Okay.
So they were talking about foxing, or saying oh, that freaking guy. All right, okay, I'm not watching this. I live in 2022. Yeah. We don't need to watch TV edits.
I had somebody in front of me once, 2 rows in front of me, watching Gone Girl. And there's this scene. I won't describe exactly how this happens, but let's just say that there is blood spraying onto another individual during kissing, during the acts of love. And it was just there on the plane, and I was 3 rows back, and I could see this. I'm like, there are children on this plane that could just be watching this.
Yeah.
I'm no prude, but come on, this is crazy.
So Terrence Malick. So A Hidden Life. Let's actually start specifically with A Hidden Life.
Okay.
Now, as a Catholic, I should have more, some more skin in this game because the guy's, blessed Carl at this point. He's on his way to become a saint. The man who's depicted in this film. First, I want to hear a defense about why. So, Terrence Malick is known for films that some would describe as overwrought.
Okay. Yeah.
Too long.
Sure.
Kind of slow. And they're romantic, capital R. Full of vigor and kind of saccharine in their focus and slowness. Emphasis on slow. So, what is it that How would you dispel that criticism?
How would I dispel the criticism?
For everybody at home, this is a director I'm talking to.
So, I mean, first of all, I think the thing that Terrence Malick does better than any other filmmaker that I've seen is take, the ordinary, and it's beautiful, but it's still ordinary.
Yeah.
And so in A Hidden Life, the thing that is so beautiful and kind of heartrending about it is just their normal life.
Their hidden life.
Yeah, right. Hidden life. Anyway, so that's a big part of why we love it is because it is just this family wanting to live their kind of simple life, diligently and faithfully, but doing so for him takes him away from his family, and but they are, as a couple, committed to each other all the way through.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful picture of a marriage and a beautiful picture of them, raising their children and living with their convictions.
No, yeah, and I think that the story itself is very airtight.
But as far as the filmmaking goes,
that's why I think where a vast majority of the criticism kind of lies.
And I think
for Terrence Malick specifically.
Look, if you find it boring, I can't convince you that it's not boring.
Yeah.
It requires patience, and I'll admit it's not the movie that, like, if I want a fun Friday night movie, I'm not going to pop in a Hidden Life.
Well, so I'm not saying that, and I'm not the kind of person because I think it can be easy to say, oh, you didn't like something, say like a Terrence Malick film, you must be a Philistine or something. Like you don't have the ability to enjoy a slow film, right? And I know, I like slow films, but I felt like the movie was kind of in its execution trying to communicate, and this is going to get really weird and inside baseball, but I feel like it tries to communicate that his strength comes not from any sort of tangible faith, but some sort of earth-based folk religion. And the reason why I say that is because of a lot of what the camera communicates.
Okay.
Right? The focus is primarily on Austria and its mountainous nature, right? It's very, I would say, I'd go back to saying romantic, capital R romantic. It's the land, right? It's the soil of the world. It's the mist-strewn mountains. It's the pine trees, right? All very beautifully captured. Terrence Malick is he's a great filmmaker.
Yeah.
But what he's sort of going through is something that he's gaining entirely. It didn't seem like from any sort of God in the biblical sense, but sort of God in the deist sense. Like there's this folk nature to the God in which he is pulling from. That is sort of that is my primary criticism of the movie, is that it seems like it's not necessarily, I'd say it's very unorthodox is how I would describe it.
Okay.
And I think that based on Terrence Malick's other films, that sort of makes sense.
So I haven't seen anything between Tree of Life and A Hidden Life.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen
the two life films. The Terrence Malick life films.
Well, I've seen
the life canon.
Badlands, his first film.
Yeah.
And The Thin Red Line. So I haven't seen his complete filmography or anything.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I can't. I guess I disagree because I think that it's. I guess what I would say is that I think he's just standing on a simple conviction.
Yeah.
And that happens to be, and take the shot that recurs several times where he's riding through on his motorcycle.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of a metaphor for him moving on. It's played at the end, describing, I don't know what the voiceover is at that moment, but it's kind of describing him going to heaven. And so I don't think that the landscapes are, I think that it's meant to kind of lift our eyes and evoke kind of a heaven.
Yeah.
And show the parallels between this kind of, simple, faithful life that they're living, and what's to come. So I don't know. I guess I don't see that so much as like the source of his faith, but just, it's I don't know. It's a beautiful setting, and it's a metaphor.
Which is a valid interpretation.
I don't know.
I don't know. Just talking film.
Wow. As a guy who's never seen that movie before, let me tell you, you guys succeeded in making that conversation just as uninteresting as possible.
Yeah. As I was talking, I was like, "This is not an interesting conversation."
I'm kidding. No, I always like to hear. Chandler talk about.
No,
the
it's
movies.
it's important that Chandler had an opportunity though to come and say his piece.
I guess all I'm saying is that I love Terrence Malick movies, and
that's a totally legitimate position.
But I
except for the fact that you are less of a person because of it. So do not forget that. You are inferior.
Yeah.
In all.
I'm not trying to like imitate Terrence Malick either.
No, of course not.
And in
No
fact,
sane man would.
but I respect the game.
Yeah.
So.
Respect the
Game
game.
respects Gabe.
Yeah.
Game respects game.
Guys, this show, what the frick is it about? This show is called Monomaniacs. We're about talking about somebody's monomaniacal obsession of the previous week, right? And we do that about 50% of the time if we're lucky. But we get there. We're talking about it.
Yeah.
So, Chandler, you're on the podcast.
I am.
You only get on Monomaniacs once, unless you're Brant Cullen.
I was gonna say, I was like,
Just wait a few months. He'll be back.
He'll be on. He'll be our only recurring guest.
Yeah.
Mark my words. No. Of course, Joe can come back on if he wants. So this is your opportunity. What is your current monomaniacal obsession?
so I have a direction I want to take this.
Yeah.
It is not limited to just the past week,
Okay.
but
That's
I've been
fine.
thinking a lot about it this week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's totally fine. That's under the purview.
So, if you had asked me this question maybe 4 months ago,
Yeah.
I would have had whatever I taught that week because I teach at a private school once a week on Thursday mornings, a class on history and literature.
Yeah.
And this was my first year teaching, and that means that every week I have to develop a new monomaniacal obsession just to
Yeah.
figure out what I'm supposed to be talking
So
about.
if they
There
ask you
go.
a question, you have an answer.
Exactly, right. But this summer I'm working on writing a script.
Yes.
And so I was wondering, can we talk today about monomaniacal obsessions? Not just about 1 week of monomaniacal obsessions,
But about having them.
So
or just in general.
my-
Are you talking about the outside perspective or the inside perspective?
I am talking about the crisis I have about once a year
Yeah.
of I'm a filmmaker and I call myself a filmmaker, but I haven't made something apart from like commercials lately.
And a short film.
But
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
2 years ago.
Oh gosh, it was 2
Was
years
that
ago.
2
You know?
years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was around the time A Hidden Life came out.
Chandler, you made a hidden life. What? Welcome to the studio, Terrence Malick. in his tiny form, his small Mario form, he's been hit once.
So when I was in junior high,
Yeah.
my youth pastor asked me once, like, what do you think is your gift?
Yeah.
And I was still trying to figure out what that was, but I said something that I've still remembered to this day, and I said, I think it's my ambition. And I have kind of wrestled with this question.
How old were you at that time?
I was maybe 13.
That is a lot of grandiose,
I was extremely grandiose.
sort of
Yeah.
feeling for a 13-year-old.
And at the time, I thought I was going to be like an engineer and an astronaut.
Yeah.
And I pivoted to then be a novelist. And in high school,
Instead
I
of
wanted
going
to be...
out and finding stars, you're finding stars on Earth and capturing them
Exactly.
and putting them on the screen.
Yeah.
Beautiful. It's like poetry, it rhymes.
But in high school, I wanted to be like the next great American novelist, as many, teenage writers want to be.
Yeah.
And then when I got to college, then I that changed and developed into film, and then I wanted to become a filmmaker. And there's always this question: am I doing this because I want to be famous and remembered, or am I doing this because I actually, love this thing and I want to be excellent at it? Like, what does success look like?
Yeah.
And I've been talking to a lot, or I haven't, not a lot, but I've talked to older men lately, and I've gotten.
Sure you want to admit that? How have you been talking to them?
I've heard from a number of older men.
Yeah.
I used to be really ambitious when I was young,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then something happened along the way.
Yeah.
And so I was just talking with my wife about it today. Of like, is this something that everyone goes through? Like, is this something that everyone goes through? Is it something that a lot of men go through? Do women have these same kinds of thoughts all the time too?
I'm glad you brought up the women point because I think all three of us are very qualified to speak on it.
I think that that's actually a really interesting question because when you read about the life stories of famous musicians or famous performers of any respect or famous artists of any respect, there seems to be a moment or I guess you could call it monomaniacism, right? Where they just decide that this is their thing.
Yeah.
Right? Where very little else really matters.
Right.
Right. And I think when you talk to a lot of older people and they say, well, I was really ambitious, but then I had to feed my kids. Or I was really ambitious, but I decided that I needed to plant roots. Or I was really ambitious, but I decided that I couldn't push myself to that respect. Like they decide. There's a moment where they make that choice.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is accurate necessarily, because there are a lot of people who have really well balanced lives who are also famous and also very influential. What was that guy that Gregory Allen something, the folk
Isikoff?
musician? Yeah, Isikoff. Famously just has a farm.
Yeah.
And is like primarily a farmer. Also makes music.
Coulter Wall, country musician.
Yeah, Coulter Wall, good example of that.
Got a ranch.
There's just and I mean sometimes people LARP as normal human beings and not. But it seems to me that there's a moment where they decide, okay, I'm going to focus primarily on this. And the funny thing is the Sunset Strip and Venice Beach is full of those idiots who did the same thing but never broke through.
Actually became successful.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think it's indicative of the fact that so many famous individuals have broken lives.
Yeah.
Right. So they're well respected for their craft, but everything surrounding their craft, as in, everything outside of it, right, is pretty much a mess, right? Which is something that from a societal perspective we usually just forgive or don't even care too much about, because they're producing, they're making that sacrifice for whatever piece of, art or entertainment they're producing.
Is that specifically what you're thinking of?
Let me kind of trace the development a little bit.
Okay, sounds good.
I wanted to be in high school the kind of writer that in 100 years would be taught in high schools.
Yeah.
So I was not looking for the kind of like celebrity, but what it was I wanted to like be part of the canon. And then eventually I read a book by Christian Wyman, a poet, and it's called "He Held Radical Light," and it's about him going through these same things as a young man, and he has this encounter with another older poet, and this older poet is talking to Christian Wyman, and he says to Christian, I remember the day when I knew my poems wouldn't last.
Yeah.
I was 38. And then Christian Wyman has a great thing in there, and he says, I thought for a minute, I am 38. And he has a great line. It says, I felt as if my soul had chewed tinfoil. And another person he'd asked another poet, what's it like to be a famous poet? And he said, it's like being famous in your family. Which is to say not famous at all.
Yeah.
So I used to when I used to think about success, I used to think of it in terms of I either need to devote everything. It's either my art or my family. Right?
Yeah.
And to pursue one is to destroy the other. What I've come around to at this point, is that for me it seems at the moment it's not between my art and my family, it's between art and being comfortable.
Yeah.
Am I willing to not watch Parks and Rec with my wife in the evening in order to go write in my office?
Yeah.
Which is why I've been thinking about this week, because I was just thinking, I haven't been writing lately. What am I doing? I'm not on mission.
Let's take a step back here, though. Right, and examine the premise that you just put forward, because a very cynical individual would say, well, no, because the decision not to watch Parks and Rec with your wife is actually a decision of separation from the family, right, and hermetization, right? It's not about comfort, it's about you separating yourself and focusing solely on your art for a time, right?
Yeah, but it's not like I'm still with my family a lot.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But it's this is a gradient, right? It's not not yes or no. And so any time that time is sacrifices, or you push aside that time and go and do that, whatever that thing is, right, is technically an hour you could have spent, with your family.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have been like all that quality of time.
Yeah.
We're just kind of vegging on the couch. But also, another aspect of this is that my wife is as supportive of what I'm doing as I am, which is to say that if she were not on board with filmmaking, then this would be a very tough spot, right?
Yeah.
But because she's like, oh, you're right, you should be writing, then it's like a kick in the pants too, or it's like, even though I'm doing it by myself, she's kind of with me in a sense.
Yeah.
So did you come on this podcast to brag, or what's the problem?
Yeah.
What's the issue?
The problem is I live in Jonesville, Michigan.
Yeah.
I'm happy with my life.
Yeah.
I like the work that I do to get paid.
Yeah.
That's not, I'm not moving to LA. I'm not living in New York.
Yeah.
When I'm currently trying to get a film into film festivals, when I think about going to those places and trying to like pitch myself, that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And like, so what I'm saying is that all of the things that I normally have heard of, like what you're supposed to do if you want to
Succeed at that particular
in
thing, yeah.
being a filmmaker, I don't really like that. Doesn't make me excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like though that your number is probably growing drastically.
My
Right.
number,
As
what
in
does
like
that mean?
as in the people who feel that way. The dog is
Whoa.
That's some dog barking going on the radio.
Producer, get on this in. Come on. open the
Is this a
door.
first? I've never heard.
No, this is definitely not a first. Did you not listen to the Ian Andrews episode?
Yeah,
she barked
she's
like
barking.
4 or 5 times.
Oh, okay, maybe.
What is
Yeah.
she doing?
What is she doing?
Goodness, Lucy.
Gotta get rid of that thing. I always
No,
told
but
you.
I love
I told
her.
you from the very first episode. You didn't need a
But
dog.
I love her so much.
Okay, so what I mean by is your number is rising is that more and more, and there's problems with this because I'm actually kind of pro gatekeeping in a lot of ways. But entertainment is democratized.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm sure that there is a part of your brain that's pulling you to say, I can stay in Jonesville, Michigan,
Yeah.
because I don't have to, there's all these people who are getting famous out of the Midwest. There's all
Sure.
these people who are getting famous out of the Deep South. Like, you don't necessarily have to go to LA or New York, the two coasts, to make that happen. And that's just sort of, entertainment has changed in the way that it's presented. So I'm sure that's kind of a pressure pushing in the other direction.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, to some extent.
Yeah.
yeah.
But at the same time, though, I mean, if you're a grip or a cinematographer,
Yeah.
all the way from the bottom to the top, I'm sure the way that you get paid is you go and you work in LA. So, I
Right.
mean, something as simple as finding a production crew could probably be twice as difficult, if not 3 times.
Yeah, or I mean, I just have to do a lot of driving.
Yeah.
Like I there's a kind of a film scene in Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
And so I know some people there, and they live in Grand Rapids, so they have their thing. But if I
Yeah.
were trying to be in a grip, I'd have to drive 2 hours every day.
Yeah. Which,
I mean, come on.
a small sacrifice to make.
yeah. Come on, dude. People do that in LA through traffic.
Yeah, I guess
every
that's
day.
true. I guess that's
$6
true.
gas, whatever.
Yeah. But let's talk a bit more about the sort of core genesis of this problem. Then is a question about whether or not it is okay, right, to feel comfortable with the place that you are in, and whether or not that's what is that detrimental to, right? Like, because that's my question. In my mind, I've fully accepted the fact that a good life, right,
A hidden life, if you will.
a hidden life,
A tree of life, if you will.
a secret life. Walter,
My son.
father of Walter Mitty, Chandler. I'm perfectly okay with having a comfortable and good life, right? If at the end of the day I can say that I provided comfort and was able to have a good life, just from a personability standpoint, right?
Uh-huh.
Not necessarily from a grandiose standpoint, right? Maybe that's just the level of comfort that I'm at. Like anybody, I have
I'm
the
calling BS on that.
yeah.
I'm calling BS on that because I'm sure that, like me, every day, there's that small voice in the back of your head that gnaws.
Yes, I know it.
There's that small voice in the back of your head that gnaws and says,
But what if? Yeah.
But what if?
Can I ask you,
Yeah.
both of you, when you were teenagers,
Yeah.
did you have that same thing where you were like, I've got to
Of course.
go out and
Yeah,
be,
yeah. I
be
mean,
somebody? and
I
make
thought I was
something?
going to be president.
Yeah.
Like you were legitimately, you were.
Yeah. No, I thought,
Yeah.
but I had
that
no
kind of-
idea what it would take. And I lived in Washington State. That wasn't going to happen. But, there was still this portion of you that says, hey,
Well, how long did that hang
I
up?
don't know, a couple of years.
But and now, like, is there still some part of you that's like,
There's no desire to be
there's
president.
something in your
but-
chest that needs to like.
So this actually is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately too.
Yeah.
Actually, because, I work as you do, right? And I waste time as you do, right? Either watching YouTube videos or playing Tekken, right? Or making this podcast. And every once in a while, pretty consistently, I'll sit there and I'll think, where is my artistic oeuvre? What have I done? Right? And I say, well, maybe I should write something. Maybe I should open that Ableton maybe I should make some music. I got the freaking subscription. I might as well do it. Or, I gotta, start focusing on maybe trying to put together some sort of audio production or something along those lines. And it consumes me for like 3 days, right? You get these moments of fervor, right? Because you think that if you're not producing something, and I think this is actually probably one of the big issues with having a liberal arts education, an issue, I use that word lightly, but having a liberal arts education is you think, to be a person, to be well-rounded, to be a fully virtuous individual, not only is there a virtue to knowing, but a virtue to creating and producing.
Yeah.
Right. And not being able to do that or not doing it consistently, you do feel like there is a hole, like there is something that you're not producing or doing.
So I think that does hit on something, though, which is your motivation, particularly for doing the thing, right? Which is something Chandler mentioned earlier, right? It's like, why am I doing this? Is it because, A, I want to express myself artistically? Is it because, B, I want to do something more creative with my time? Or is it C, is it because of the chance of potentially becoming a great based off of doing this thing, right? To gain the success, to get all that money, to get the fame, right, from this extra thing that I'm doing, right? I mean, like in all honesty, with like something like this, like a podcast, you'd be crazy to think that every once in a while I don't think, oh, well, and if we got big, X, Y, Z, you know, or anything like that. And I think that the managing of expectations and is the only way that you're going to be able to enjoy the thing while in a state of not being successful, right? Or like big success, right? Like, because, success is based off of definition, your own personal one, hypothetically. And maybe it's, for me, the act of creating and having fun and doing this, right, is enough of a thing for us to continue doing it. And thankful to our patrons for allowing us to be able to do it and, not have to spend all this additional money to make it happen, and everything like that. But at the same time, I do wonder whether or not if all safety nets were pulled away and this had to work, would I put all this additional effort into it to really try to make it work? And is that just, what's the word I'm looking for? Is that just an excuse because the people that truly succeed are the ones that, regardless of whether or not there is that safety net, regardless of whether or not it has to work, to them, it has to, right? Because I'm supposed to be the best podcaster ever.
Well, so you laid out, I think, 3 motivations. One of them was becoming famous.
Yeah.
One of them was expression. Was the other one because you have fun?
Yeah, for fun.
I think you could add maybe 2 more. One of them is you want to make money.
Yeah.
Another one is because this is the thing that you should be doing.
And I would actually, I would say that for the cause is an option.
Sure.
Right? Because you're trying to make a difference.
Yeah.
True.
True. Yeah, and my question for myself is always like I have not actually finished a feature-length screenplay.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, so then let's examine it then. What would you say is the strongest motivating factor for you on the creation of, say, a film or a screenplay?
Yeah, this is a challenging question to answer.
I mean, let me approach this from a very cynical angle, though.
Yeah.
If I hear that, what I'm hearing is, you don't want to admit the fact that it's for either the money or the fame, right?
Well, no, I'm willing.
If it's hard to make that decision, right? Because I feel like if I don't know, like maybe you're misconstruing things or something like that, or you're heightening your opinion of yourself. But if you're doing it for the art or for the fun,
let him finish his explanation. He was in the middle of the explanation.
Okay.
You're trying you're putting justification.
I'm
on
just
things.
saying.
Chandler, go ahead.
What I'm saying is that I struggled for a long time because I thought a few things. First of all, I wanted to be excellent.
Yeah.
And I thought that the measure of being excellent was whether or not you were remembered.
Yeah.
And I had to have that second one stripped out because there are lots of artists who have been excellent who have not been remembered.
Yeah. Session musicians, great example of that.
And so that's one thing.
Yeah.
But then another thing is trying to figure out, I have to get theological here a little bit. What are my gifts and what am I required to do with those gifts?
Yeah.
And so part of that question is just, who am I? Who has God made me to be? And what am I supposed to do? What does faithfulness look like in that? And so this is why I've been thinking about it this week, because I just had this kind of realization of, what does it look like for me to be kind of on mission, to use that language, or just like what is kind of my personal mission? What should my life be looking like?
I think that's something you should think about or keep in the back of your head. Is something I told a friend of mine who was wondering what he could do, because I work partially, I work periodically for a record label, and a guy was like, what can we do to make this like work? And he was like, oh, can we all put money aside every month to maybe one day buy a studio space or et cetera, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you know what you could do to make this take off? Is take 15 minutes a day and use that to write a song.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Like there is a certain level of, regardless of, this is a conversation I have with my wife all the time, because she's a visual artist. She does, drawing, painting, ceramics. And I'm like, she'll every once in a while she'll get on this thing where she says, I want to buy this really big, expensive artistic edition. Yeah. And I say, well, I think that a good measure of whether or not you would use that is what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Right. Where part of that passion and part of that thing being something that you really should be doing is that regardless of circumstances, it's something you want to do.
Right.
Right. And sometimes that doesn't even necessarily mean that you desire to do it at all times, but something that you're able to make yourself do. Right. Because if you look at a good example, actually, if you want to talk about writing, good example, Hemingway, garbage man, but, great writer. Every single day,
Yeah.
He wrote in the mornings.
Yep.
I believe. I think that's correct.
Stephen King, another garbage man, but great writer.
Yeah. Well, he had Coke for help. I guess Hemingway had alcohol to help. But he would work off his hangover, and he would write for 4 or 5 hours a day.
Yeah.
I've been in the room where he did it in Key West, and then he would just, part of it is there being a certain level of discipline. And I think that's something you need to start thinking about in that capacity.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Dylan.
But also, what is the primary motivating factor behind that discipline, right? I think that's the question that we're trying to answer, not necessarily.
I'm trying to be practical.
Yeah. I'm just saying, that's a question that Chandler's asking of himself in this instance, right? Is like, what is that thing that's driving him, or the potential drive in the discipline? And I think if you understand that, you have a better chance of implementing that discipline, hypothetically.
I also think that I brought up the comfort thing earlier, which is not just a matter of, do I want to watch TV with my wife? It's also, I'm a freelancer.
Yeah.
I can take on work if I want to, and I can say no to work if I want to. It's comfortable to take on work,
Yeah.
And so there's that extra element of like, do I want to spend my time doing this that is honestly like hard? Like it's harder to write a script than it is to like make a promo video.
Yeah, it's kind of tough, because I feel like through this line of thinking, we often diminish the practical in favor of the exceptional, right? Now, that's not a bad thing in its entirety, because obviously, you want to do exceptional things, but at the same time, not all of us are either A, called to be exceptional, and B, those that live practical lives are not less in value as individuals than those that live exceptional.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
In my opinion. So I think it's partially, okay to fall within that space, right? And it's mostly just you yourself and what you feel confident in, right? Like whether or not you are happy within that space, right? In that comfortable, practical space, or you would find more happiness in the exceptional one, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's even a matter of happiness.
Yeah.
I'm happy when I'm not writing too, Yeah.
If not more.
Well, exactly, right? Then what's the malfunction here, right? Because obviously there's something you're not happy with, right? Because you're self-examining yourself and you're saying, why aren't I?
Yeah.
Right? I should be, right? So there is to you a better space to be.
Sorry, are you just saying that I should stop writing?
No. I'm just saying that obviously you feel like you should be, right? Like there's something that's pulling you to be doing it, right? And so there is a motivating factor. You're not entirely happy in the circumstance in which you're not writing, right? So there is a difference in happiness there.
Okay,
is my feeling.
No, Dylan, I think it's a vegetables question. Right?
Yeah,
I think it's a vegetables question.
Yeah,
honestly, I think that you don't have to be like hardwired to enjoy the thing, right? What's good for you doesn't have to be fun.
Well, also,
I'm not saying about
I do
fun.
enjoy writing when I get into it.
Yeah.
You know, but you're right. It is. I think it is in some sense is the vegetables question. It's like this is
the greatest authors and poets and musicians ate plate after plate of Brussels sprouts, and before they got the strain right, and Brussels sprouts sucked. You know what I mean? Right? They had to move in that direction. A good example of this, actually, something I talk about a lot is Brandon Sanderson, who wrote just hundreds of Star Wars and D&D novels that all like suck, right? But he sent his 4 kids to college.
Yeah,
and he I'm sure he wrote a few of the books are known as pretty good novels, I guess, right? And he worked his way to it, but I mean, his life was entirely vegetables, right? And who knows whether or not he had any aspirations for something greater, but like there's a lot of those people, and those people need to exist. Now, I'm not saying you're that guy, nor should you aspire to be that guy, but that's a part of the process.
Well, I'm also saying that at this point I'm not success. I don't think looks like being famous.
Yeah,
I think I've moved past that phase. I think in part success just looks like trying to like doing it.
Yeah,
continuing the work. You know,
because success in your sphere right now would be finishing a feature-length film.
Exactly. Yeah,
that would be success. That's something that very few people have done. So that would be success. Right. And that should be the goal.
And see, and that's what I'm trying to say, right?
In a very roundabout way, apparently.
No, not in a roundabout way. I feel like I'm being diminished over here. I think that what comfort is, right? It's kind of an ambiguous definition, right? Because feeling comfortable, you have to do less work there. When you feel happy there, but like if that true happiness, right, or the thing that you will find actual contentment in, right, is implementation and doing a thing, right, then that's the obvious better choice, right? Because you lack contentment, right? You're restless when you're not doing the thing, right? You feel like you're less of an individual because you don't have the strength, to go out and write, right? So there is, a definite void there that needs to be filled, right? And so that's what I'm trying to say. I think that if you believe that it's doing the thing, right, and that's the thing that fixes that lack of contentment, then I'm all for it, right? That's all I'm saying is that being doing things that are just easier to do is not necessarily the best option, because it's about you and your drive and your what you feel like you should be doing.
So I still haven't answered what is kind of an underlying question.
Yeah.
Which is this a universal thing, or is this some people?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I feel like it's in everybody in some senses.
Yeah.
Right? Like everybody does have those aspirations, but I think it's those that are apt to actually do things to implement them, and those that are content not to, right? And even though in the back of their mind they're always like, well, I wish I was a famous XYZ, right? They're, in all actuality, they could wake up the next day and not care about that at all.
Sure.
Not give anything, about it, and just decide that I'm happy being the person that I am, even if they don't articulate that. In actuality, they're content with the person that they are, because they're not going to change it, right? They don't. It's that they're not so discontented that they go and actually implement something.
It's a matter of recognizing other goods.
Yeah. Agreed.
Of like, there are other good things that I want to pursue, and they're genuinely good, and so it's okay if I let go of the other things.
Yeah. Agreed.
But do you? I asked Shad this, but do you feel like you have that kind of inside thing that you're like?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there
are
certain times in my life where I have been squarely ambitious, where I've just been like, I'm going to be famous at whatever I'm doing. I think in a lot of like late high school, early college, right? I think is like the not the genesis, but like the crucible of this stuff, like where it reaches its white
Phil
hot.
Collins or Peter Gabriel.
It reaches its highest heat because that's when you've got that level of freedom and you've got the confidence, overconfidence and ignorance that you believe that you can totally do it, right? And you are, starting all these projects. I'm going to lead this club. I'm going to start this thing.
Right.
I'm going to, at least that was the way it was for me. And, I think for me, it's busyness and other things getting in the way eventually just take precedent, right? Right now I'm so busy with work and my house and life and stuff like that I don't think about what would happen if I got famous anymore, right? It's like, well, I got to think about how I'm going to get through this day in particular, right? Like not from a mental standpoint, like a mental health or anything like that. It's just purely how do I plan to get through the day from a work capacity standpoint? Like,
and that's a really practical thing too, of just like waking up in the morning and like, what do I need to do today?
Yeah, like people who are blue collar who work for a living. They just don't have.
The rest of us don't work for a living.
We do.
I work.
I'm just saying. No, I'm just saying.
Look, it involves me looking at a screen for 8 hours, but I work.
I'm
for
just
a
saying. I think there's a core reason why less creative things come out of that sort of socioeconomic place. It's because they don't have the they have the capacity, but they don't have the flexibility to do that. Right? They're too busy working.
I would actually say that it's just a different kind of creativity.
Well, yeah, you could say that. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree.
I mean, I happen to know lots of people who work in those kinds of blue collar industries, and they're always full of lots of creative ideas. It's just a different kind of way of being, thinking through a problem.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think the thing that has been in the back of my head this entire time, honestly, Chandler, is that a vast majority of great artistic talents did not produce any sort of great work until they were in their 40s.
Oh yeah,
or
right.
50s.
Well,
right?
that's a consolation when it's about once a spring.
Yeah.
That it comes around and I get this like sense of like, oh,
you got a lot of time.
I'm not doing it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a consolation until you're their age.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And then you realize you've crossed over the hill.
You'll be listening to a podcast and there's a guy who's younger than you who's like a famous comedian, and you're like,
we're finally getting to that point.
Yeah, it's like, oh gosh,
Gardini,
Sean Guard Dog. Like, there's a moment where you're like, oh, okay, there are people who at this young age can blow up.
Yeah.
I'm kind of want for examples off the top of my head right now, but a lot of people, it takes a long time.
Right.
And sometimes it's people who aren't even primarily artists, right?
Yeah.
Kurosawa wasn't a filmmaker primarily until I think his 50s. Then he made his first film, and it was still amazing because it's Kurosawa. So you gotta.
I was just talking to somebody today about Wallace Stevens, who worked in insurance for his whole life, and like that was his thing, and the poetry just kind of happened on the side,
And that's not only like an American story for a lot of like American artists, but I guess I did use Kurosawa as an example. It's a worldwide thing. It's just sometimes it takes people to let it bloom. So I know that can, for a lot of people, be seen as an empty platitude, and I'm sure that that's probably like going off your back like a duck.
Also, I don't want
like a duck,
to. I don't want to give you the impression that I have this kind of like superiority complex.
No,
that
I'm not under that impression.
I have this sense of like I'm on this upward trajectory and I'm destined for fame.
It's not teleological.
Like
I think we're at least at the age where there is this comfortable level of hope, right?
Well, and this is another interesting thing that as I've grown, this thing has changed. And as you grow older, I'm at a point where, I'm now starting to have children, and I'm starting to even just think about my father differently, and think about, like my dad is a musician, and when he was real, in his 20 years, he wanted to kind of be a rock band kind of guy,
Wanted to be a rock man.
Yeah.
One of those rock guys.
Anyway, so I'm thinking about, him differently. I'm thinking about teenagers differently. I'm thinking about men who are retired differently. And so I'm just curious to see how does this change over the course of my life.
When was he in his 20s? I'm curious.
When was my dad in his 20s?
Yeah.
He was born in 1963, so in the 80s.
Okay. So, so you have your father's fairly old in comparison to ours, who's had us in the, we were born in 97 and he was like 20 at the time. But so he was 20 in the 80s. So that's an interesting time to want to be a rock star, actually.
Yeah.
Now that I'm thinking about that.
I mean, I grew up listening to Bon Jovi and a lot of Bon Jovi.
Yeah, Bon Jovi,
Bruce Springsteen,
Tears for Fears. Yeah. No, I can imagine that, and it's odd too, because that's something that I think about a lot too in relation to my father, because my dad was kind of a career man, and I know for a fact that I'm going to be around my kids more than my dad was, right? Because at the time, to be a career man, it meant that you had to be at work for 10 hours a day, right? Now I have to just be in front of my computer for 10 hours a day, right, to do what I do. But there's you start to recontextualize yourself as well as your parents and the way they raised you pretty quickly. Which especially I can imagine that it's unique in your scenario because your dad wanted to be an artist, and like you're sitting here like I want to be an artist, right? And I'm sure it sounds like your dad ended up still being an artist.
Yeah, I mean,
not to the capacity that he
still plays. He still plays keyboard and everything.
Yeah, not to the capacity that I'm sure he imagined.
And when the Saints come marching in, guys. Before we move on, guys, we're getting close to wrapping this up. We have to do something very important, which is thank our patrons for helping us do this show, right? Because we could not do it without y'all folks out there. I want to make a special shout out to our top patrons, Joe Papalardo and Zach and Amber Strehle.
Yeah,
you help make this possible more than anybody else does, right? If you want to be in that prestigious
and
list.
our new patron,
and of course, Danny Rongley, coming in as a new AMA tier individual in our Patreon. So I've got a question from him today, as well as a question from Joe Papalardo.
There's always a question from Joe.
Because there's always a question.
Let's hope it's not a non sequitur this time.
I don't think we're going to be so lucky. Okay, so we got. We'll do one. How about this one? Dylan is USDA certified cute. Is his paperwork up to date?
This is from Joe.
Yeah. Yes. Listen. I haven't done my rabies shot yet. Now I'm still. It's only because I'm scared, right? There was not enough testing by the FDA on that rabies shot. People are getting blood.
Clots.
Yeah, people are getting blood clots off the rabies shot. I don't know about taking it.
Yeah.
So,
our rabies shots specifically have really long needles, or is that tetanus?
Oh, I forget.
I feel like they all have really long.
Yeah. Any needle is too long. Needle. And Danny has got a question for us, which he's asking, what are we reading right now?
What are we reading right now?
Yes.
Okay, let's. Chandler, actually,
yes, we'll start with our guest.
What are you reading right now?
What are you reading?
Oh, geez.
Are you being diligent enough to be reading right now?
Well, I have a book that's on my desk that I've not started reading.
Okay.
Honestly, I'm not really in the middle. I've been reading some Sherlock Holmes, actually. And that's been fun.
Arthur Conan Doyle.
Yeah, I read so much during the school year, and then now I'm not. But I've got like several books that I'm like, oh, I need to read that this summer. Like the one I'm wanting to read is The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, Carl Trueman. But haven't picked it up yet.
This is going to sound like heresy, and I've said this before on the show, but an e-reader is not, if you want to just read books, it's sometimes a legitimate move.
Yeah, totally. I'm not against it.
Yeah, it's an easy way to get around. You can get the book on the book. You can get the book on the book. You get the book on the e-reader. And you get the book on the book. You get the book on the e-reader, and you can fly through it really quickly, and then maybe get a physical copy if you finish the book, or etc. So I mean, I would recommend that if you're having a hard time, because it revolutionized my reading.
So Sherlock Holmes has been a lot of fun because it's like episodic.
Yeah,
and so you can just kind of pick it up, put it down, and so that's been my go-to. Like, it's 9:30 and I want to read something, so this is fun, and it feels really appropriate to like sip a little bit of whiskey, and read Sherlock Holmes, because then
so that way you can justify your daily alcohol problem. Perfect.
I just it's like it feels like this is what Sherlock would do.
It's a perfect nightcap kind of book. Yeah. Right now my wife and I are going through this thing where every night we read for like 2 hours.
That's fantastic.
That's great.
It's wild. I think it's because we realize that we don't actually like watching things together because we have wildly different tastes, and I don't think she likes the fact that I can kind of be slightly critical.
Wow, Shadrach Strehle.
Yeah, right. So I've been just flying through this book on Ruby Ridge. So
yes.
I don't know what the title is off the top of my head, but because I'm reading it on my e-reader, so I got the book, and then it's just I know I don't like look at its cover all the time, but that's been a very interesting, very I don't know. It's very. The Ruby Ridge incident is kind of like a start to the 21st century in a lot of ways for the way that we view the intelligence apparatus, FBI, CIA, ATF, and sort of what exactly an extrajudicial killing is. It was kind of the first time the average American understood that and knew what that was. Also, it's kind of this interesting conversation about, because I've read a lot about radical white supremacists. I assure you that white nationalism and all of its derivatives is a garbage ideology. So don't worry about me. But it's just kind of interesting, kind of watching, because of what I've learned a lot from this book, and one of the things that I've learned is the reason why white identitarians or the Aryan Nation or a lot of other what we would consider to be the Ku Klux Klan, another example as the organizations, like the white nationalist groups, aren't kicking around really, is because we killed them. We just murked them. It was wild. In the 90s, it was just like we'd go to Northern Idaho and an FBI agent would just kill a dude over and over again. And eventually they decided, okay, we got to lone wolf it. And so now whenever a white supremacist does anything, it's like a guy who writes a manifesto. It's because everybody's like, oh shit, they're shooting us. So it's an interesting book. And the one big takeaway actually that has been I've been thinking about a lot lately is that it's really easy to see somebody who and who you respect and who is very smart, because a lot of people who end up in the mountains afraid of the government are not idiots. They're actually very well read, very inquisitive people who are looking for something, right? They just end up looking for the wrong thing over and over again, right? And they might be some of the highest IQ point people, like the Weaver family, insanely well read. Right, but the reading that they did and the direction that they found themselves in brought them into a mountain in Idaho, being white identitarians and getting shot from a helicopter. It's just it's such a interesting derivative of what can happen to a person who, at the start of it, is genuinely asking questions, and in their case is genuinely on fire faith-wise. So it's just kind of a wild thing that can happen to an individual. So I don't know. It's got me thinking a lot about people I know and about, there's always somebody who you see and you're like, this person has a screw loose, but they're smart. Like they've got it. They're fast as a whip, but you're like, man, I wish you didn't have a screw loose. And then all these people who are being interviewed by this author were like, yeah, they had a screw loose. And I was like, whatever. And then a year and a half later, they're getting shot on a mountain. So it's a wild story.
It happens.
Yeah.
We don't have much time left, so I'll be quick about it. I am reading two things right now. I'm listening to the Horus Heresy Warhammer books off of Shad's suggestion.
Yeah,
pretty good. Yeah. It's fun, light listening, and I like the.
I'm also doing that.
Yeah, I do like the genre, so it's fun. To sleep, I am reading The American Military History, which is a tome about that thick.
That doesn't sound like a very good endorsement.
Yeah. Well, so I got it because I was in a bookstore and in the way back, in this room that was just dusty old, like those books that are just that sort of felt cover, and that's it. And they've got gold lettering, no drawing or anything, nothing on the front and the back. It's just on the spine.
Yeah.
Something that said it was written in the 60s, American history of history of the American military. I was like, sure, why not? It was like $5, I'll get it. And then I have 5 times attempted to start the book and have felt too tired to continue 2 pages into it. So it works in the sense that it helps me fall asleep.
Nice.
Not necessarily the most interesting read in the world.
I had a friend who would keep he had Aristotle's Ethics by his bed, and he would pick it up and read it. and then go to sleep.
Aristotle and Plato, your eyes just like start to gloss over every single
Yeah.
thing that's being written.
I think you actually have to be some sort of freak to enjoy reading philosophy. You know, and like I have a lot of respect for philosophers, sort of. But like, just to sit there and just be like, yeah, I'm picking up what you're throwing down.
So I have there's a book group that I'm a part of former Hillsdale grads, and we do a Zoom call on Tuesday nights.
Yeah.
And one of the guys in the group was a philosophy major. He's just finished law school.
Yeah.
And every time he wants to nominate,
That's a rough comedy.
he wants to nominate like stuff where we always have to ask him like, so does this one have the equations where there's no numbers? And he's like, yes, this one does have the equations with no numbers. And we're like, we're not going to read another like, philosophy thing that has equations in it.
Yeah. We'll keep this conversation going on the Patreon. Chandler, do you have anything you want to plug before we move on?
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah. Anything at all?
Double Bondsman.
So I made a movie called Double Bondsman with my friend Josh Liebhauser, who happens to not be in the room. Just kidding, he's right over there.
Yeah.
And it's great, but you can't watch it yet. So
Look out for Double Bondsman.
Look out. Coming to a theater near you.
Yeah. And your upcoming, screenplay.
well, it's a feature length of
A feature-length
of the
version
short.
of Double Bondsman.
But also, I make videos for your business and commercials and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So if you
Is it Chandler Ryd Films? or
just chandlerryd.com, you can check out my website.
ChandlerRyd.com. Check it out. He's very good.
Very good.
So
indeed.
I do some work for him in the audio space, and he's consummate professional. So
Thank you, Shad.
I would highly recommend that you.
That's your Glassdoor review right there.
Yeah. That you check out Chandler for any sort of commercial or et cetera. That you need.
Goodbye.